What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to be setting up a landing page for our app. So if you've been following along the channel, we've been doing everything in Flutter code-wise, and in this video is going to be a little bit different. We're going to actually build this with Vue.js, which is a JavaScript framework, and we're also going to be using Bootstrap and connecting it with Firebase. So first, let me go over some quick benefits of a landing page. The main benefit is that we're going to have one link that's going to eventually link to both of those versions of the app. So since our app isn't live right now, those links won't actually be set up, but later in the future, once our app does go live, we're gonna have one location, one URL that we can easily give to people, and then regardless of their device type, they'll be able to find our app. Another benefit at this stage of the app process, which we don't have our app live yet, is we can use this landing page to start getting pre-users, or we can start building an email list of potential users. So we're going to set that up with Firebase, and what we're gonna be able to do is have a user enter their email, and we're going to collect that email, and then once the app does go live, we can send all those people who signed up for this waiting list, we can send them an email, and then ideally, since they showed interest in the app, we're going to have all these users initially the day that we launch our app, which is a very good thing to have. Finally, a landing page is actually required by both Google and Apple to get your app on the app stores. So the reason for this is they require that you have a contact. You have some sort of way that people can contact you about your app, and this landing page is going to serve that purpose. So we're also going to set up a contact form so anyone can just email us through that contact form. And those are the three main benefits of a landing page. It's definitely something you're going to want. It's going to be something that's going to make marketing your app a lot easier going forward. So let's get right to it. All right, so we first want to make sure we have npm installed. So we could do npm-v, and you can see I have it here. If not, I have a link down below where you could make sure that's installed, but pretty much just Google search that if it's not there. Because then we want to use that to install the Vue command line interface. So we're going to do that with this command, which is npm install -g, and it's Vue-CLI. So hit enter there, and I actually have not installed it yet on this computer, so this is good. You'll be able to see it from the beginning. All right, actually I'm getting this error here about not having the permissions to install new node modules. That I believe can be fixed with this command here. So first I'll try running that. Then you're in your computer's password. And this is basically just going to give you the right permissions, which we're missing. So now we can try installing that Vue CLI again. And looks like this time it's working. So you can see that the package was added right here. And then you can see also 283 packages were added because they are dependencies of this package. Command K on a Mac will clear all that out. So now we can create a new project with that new package we just installed. So we can use Vue init, and we can tell it what kind of project we want this to be. So essentially we're going to be using Webpack, and basically all Webpack is and I'll link down below a little bit more information. But all Webpack is a way to combine basically a way to package your JavaScript. And there are different things you could use instead of Webpack, but Webpack makes things a lot easier in terms of like installing packages that are Node or JavaScript packages. That's like a bit outside the scope of what this is about though. So just use Webpack, and then you just want to name your apps. I'll just do Travel Treasury Landing because this is a whole new JavaScript web app. This is not going to have anything to do with Flutter. So if you hit enter there, it's gonna start this basically it's going to start asking you a few questions about the project. So the project name is going to be that name that I already gave it. You could change that here if you wanted. Now the description, this is just a Vue project. That's fine. You can just hit enter for now. Author, that is my name, so that works. For Vue build, we're going to want runtime plus compiler. You can also do runtime only, but we are going to want both of those. Let's see. You could see if you use the arrows, you can go up and down there. So choose the first one there. Install Vue router. We're going to want yes on that. and then use ESLint. We can do no for this one. Set up unit tests. We're not going to do testing in this app. It's going to be pretty simple, so no there. And then we can also do no to this. This one here is asking if you want to use npm or yarn, or if you want to just run it yourself to get all the packages that you'll need for this project, because Vue again is going to be creating this, but there are some other dependencies that this is going to automatically get for you. Hit yes and use npm for that. So this is going to actually be creating our new Vue project here, our Vue app. All right, great. So now it is actually installed. So you can see we do have, it's telling us basically to get started what to do right here. So we're going to first cd into that new directory, which is going to be the travel treasury landing. So this directory was just created within that code directory that we were in. So this essentially is going to contain your entire project file. And then you can run npm run dev, and that's going to actually start up the development server for this. So npm run dev is going to, this is basically going to load that project that we just created on localhost 8080. All right, so if you copy this and open up a browser and paste it in there, you'll see we do have a Vue app set up, and it is just that simple. All right, so with our server running in this terminal tab, we can open up a new tab. Command T on a Mac will do that for you. And now we can actually, we want to install Bootstrap, and Bootstrap is a front-end framework. So basically what it'll allow us to do is use a lot of components that are pre-built for us, as well as it makes it easy to get your site responsive. And what a responsive site means is that it'll look good on basically every screen size. So Bootstrap does a lot of that work for us. So it's useful to use a front-end framework like this, so you don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel on that kind of stuff. So anyway, the command is npm I, which means install, and then we're going to do Bootstrap. We're also going to do jQuery and Popper.js. So all three of these are going to allow us to have full access to all of Bootstrap's capabilities. You might not need Popper.js, that's kind of just for one part of it, but I would recommend just installing all three of them now. And then once that's installed here, we're going to actually want to open up our code in our text editor. So I'm going to be using Atom. This is our project now opened up in Atom. So you're going to want to find over here the src file, and then go to main.js. And within here, this is kind of like the main part of our site. So we want to actually include Bootstrap right here. And we're going to do that with two different commands. You can do it, we'll do it actually above that line. So right here we can do, we're going to import Bootstrap, and then we're also going to import the Bootstrap CSS, Bootstrap minified CSS. That is going to allow us to have Bootstrap. To actually do something where we can see Bootstrap, we're going to start changing our layout of our page here. So nothing's changed at this point, but we do have Bootstrap now, and we can start using that. So I'm just going to use Bootstrap and kind of not go too in depth of all of what everything's doing. But if you go into the documentation, it's pretty good in terms of explaining everything. So I would recommend like reading through all of that. I guess basically if you don't understand what a class that I'm using in the code is doing, search it in the documentation here and it'll explain it for you. Right now you'll see on our page, this is what we're viewing. So if you go into the code, we can find where that is in the components folder here. You'll see there's a hello world file. So that is essentially creating all of the code that is doing this page here, or that is like that's building this page here. We're actually going to create a new component. So let's do a new file, and we're just going to call this our home page. And this will be a Vue file. So now within our home page, we can actually copy everything from the hello world Vue page, and we're going to remove a lot of stuff. So in this template here, go ahead and remove everything inside of the template tags. And then the script, we can remove name but keep data. I guess we'll just leave data blank for now. In the style, just remove everything. This right here is component, a Vue component. So what it does is it allows us to have our template here, which is going to be our HTML. Then within the scripts tag here, we can have all of our JavaScript. And then finally in the style block down here, we can have all our CSS. So the way Vue works is it does it all within one file, and we can build, I mean, since we're going to be doing kind of a simple page, we're going to do it all as this one component. So again, the app that we're going to be building is going to finally look like this. So it is just going to be one component. Now, if we go into the template here and just add a div and put text in it that just says hello, and then we go back to our app, you'll see nothing actually changes. So let's get it so that that is actually, let's get it so the app is actually loading our home page and not this hello view page. In fact, let's delete the home view page, and then you'll notice that we get an error here, which is expected. So to get the app to load the home page, we want to go into the router file here and then find the index.js. Really all we need to do is, instead of importing hello world here, we're going to instead be importing the home page, and then this will also be home page. And then same down here within the routes, we're going to change both of these. Now, we are only going to have one route in this app, and it's going to be this main route. But if you wanted multiple routes, you can just add more routes within this, and they could go to different components. So you would import those other components here, and then you could link between them with, you know, this could be like the about, and then the about would be on the home page. But for this app, we're just going to be doing one single landing page. So once that's saved and you go in here, you'll see now we are printing that hello, but you'll notice the image of that Vue logo is still there. So let's go ahead and remove that. That image is actually going to be located in the app view here. And you can see this app view is actually like the head template. So this is the main template that is going to load the other templates from the components within it. So you can see right here, this router view is actually what's loading the content of our homepage, and that's because our router here is passing that view into the app. So whatever our router is sending is going to be what is displayed right here. But then you'll notice this image is above it. So this image is always, regardless of the page, going to be loaded. So we can just delete that right there. And if you save this, you'll see it is reloaded. One nice thing about Vue, which is similar to Flutter, is that it does a hot reload type setup. So this is kind of thanks to Webpacker, and really it's nice because you don't have to keep refreshing the page. It'll just automatically refresh for you. Anyway, now we see that that hello is there, so we can actually start building our page out. So the first thing we're going to do, again, this is what our end result is going to look like. We're going to, basically you can look at this page as having 3 rows. So there's this first row with the background, and then the second row with the white background, and the third blue row down here, as well as this footer. So I guess this is 4 rows actually. So let's go ahead and add that in to our template here. Again, we want this in the home page view. Where we have this hello, let's go ahead and remove that. One thing to note is with the template, it is always going to require just one element returned. So if we were to, for instance, keep this hello and then copy it and have another div here and say, you know, hello 2, this is actually not going to work. So the reason for that is the template file needs to just return one div. So you'll see if we were to put that div inside here and save it, now we see hello and hello 2. So because of that, we want this main, we can delete all this stuff. This main div is just going to be a container, and it's going to be a container fluid, which will just give it full width. And then we want no margins on it and no padding on it. And these are bootstrap shortcuts. So if you don't have bootstrap installed, these wouldn't work. Okay, so within this container, we can create a few divs now, one for each of those rows. So the first one, let's give it, we're gonna want to give these each an ID. The first one, let's actually just call the home page. So this is going to be the main div, the first row, the one with the image. Let's give this for now a background color of red, and then actually with Bootstrap you're going to have to use their class, which will be danger. Then we want 4 of these, so copy these down. The next one will be about. So that will be kind of that information. Let's just make this yellow. The next one, this would be the about. The next one would be the contact. And we can give this one that background color of info. And the last one will actually be the footer. If we were making a more complex app, we wouldn't actually just include the footer in here. We would make it its own component and then import that. But this is just going to be a single page, so we can do that as it is. You'll notice there's nothing in these divs, so actually if we save this and go back, you won't see anything because there's no actual content. If we go ahead and give all of these a padding of 4, it'll actually just give it some height and width so that we'll actually be able to see those colors. And there they are. This is good. We have our 4 elements here. We need to expand them a little bit more now. And one very useful tool in Chrome is to use this inspector. You can see, if you click this arrow here, you can hover over stuff and see what everything is. So you can see this is our home page ID, which is what we gave it in the code. So all of that is nice to see and it'll help you understand what you're building. Now you'll notice there's this big white block up at the top. We don't really want that. So that, to me, if you hover over, you can kind of figure out what it is. In the HTML here, it is on the HTML here because you see it's highlighted there, but when we go down to the body, it's no longer highlighted. So that means somewhere in the code, the HTML has some sort of margin. Or to remove that block, if we go back to app.view, you can see there is some style on the app itself. And this margin top of 60 pixels is actually what is causing that block. So if you just remove that, you'll see now the red line is all the way up at the top. Now let's go and build out this whole top block here. The height, how I have it set now, is the height of the screen. So you can see, other than this bar up at the top, which is just kind of a notice, and we can add that later, you'll see the height of this page of this image is the height of the screen. So let's first set that up. This will be back in our homepage view. We want a full height here. We're gonna actually create a new class and we're gonna call it full height. And this is just going to set the height of this div to be the height of the view. So we can set the full height style down here, but since this is scoped, it'll only be accessible by this file. This class, actually full height, would be something that, again, this is going to be a very simple one-page app, but this is something that you would probably not want scoped, and you would want it to be accessible by all of your components. And if that's the case, you can add it in the app.view style, and this is basically like the style components that you want accessible by any of your components. So we'll just add it here as an example. So full height, and it's a very simple class. All we're going to be saying is that we want the minimum height to be 100 VH, which is the view height. So if we save that and make sure this file is saved as well, since this homepage div has the full height, if you go back in here, you'll see this whole red div takes up the whole page, and then our other 3 are below it. So that's good. Now we want to get that background on there. The background image I've actually downloaded from pixabay.com, and I'll link that below, but you can use any image. Just make sure you do have the rights to it. Online with your website, you can find a lot of like free images. Pixabay is one good one. I don't know, but you can Google it. Just make sure you have like the license to use it. A lot of images though do have the free license. So you're going to want in your assets folder here, you'll see the logo here is that logo we deleted before, and we're actually going to delete that because we don't need it. Then we can add our picture, and I have mine that I can just drag in right here. So there's the image you can see. If we go back to the home page now, we can set our homepage background in the CSS as that image. So we're going to do that with we're going to use the ID here that we have on that div. So that home page, and to set the background, here we can set the background color if we want, and this is kind of a good fallback in case the image doesn't load. I'll set it to this light blue color, which is this hex value here. I have a plugin in Atom that will change a color like a hex value color to the actual color, so it will be that color. Which reminds me, we want to remove this background danger there, so it won't be that red color. Then to actually add the background image, we can call the background property in the CSS, and we're going to give it the URL of that image we just added. So since we're in this component folder, we need to go back a directory to get to the assets folder, and that's what this ... will do. And then we can call assets and the name of the image, which mine is bgmt.jpg. And then we're going to add a few things, which are, I'm going to add no repeat and center. Then I want the background size to be cover, so these lines here are going to do that for the different types of browsers. If you save this, and there's the background image there, looking good. So the next thing we're going to do is add this image of the phone as well as this stuff over here. So the way that this is working is we have two columns here. So we have another row within, or we have a row within this this larger div, and then we have two columns. So let's set up those two columns first. So if we go back into this homepage div, we can add another div with the class container. And the container is actually just going to give us a little bit of a margin on the left and the right. So you'll notice this doesn't go all the way to the end of the screen. And then within this container, we're going to add another div, and this is going to be a row. I'm also going to add these paddings here now, so don't forget, we're going to do a padding top 3 there, and on the row we're going to do a padding bottom of 5. So that'll just give us a little bit of space. Within this row now we can add 2 columns, so we're going to have our div with a call of 6, and that is, the way Bootstrap works is there's 12 columns total that you can use. So you can divide it however you want, but if we're doing 6 and 6, it will be like this. Now we don't want the div to be, since we want this to be responsive, we only really want it to be 2 columns when it is on the large screen. So you'll notice when this shrinks down and it gets down to this breakpoint, which is the medium screen, it's no longer 2 columns, and now that column that was on the left, it is taking up all 12 columns of the row there. So to achieve that is actually very simple. You just define where you want it to be, what screen size you want the column to be, that size. So in this first column, this is going to be the left column, we're going to want to add that image. So first we're going to need to add the image into our assets folder, just like we did with our background image. This is something I created within, you could do it in Adobe XD or Sketch, or really however you want to do it. You can get the iPhone screen from Apple itself and then just fill in a screenshot. You can take a screenshot of your Flutter app and just place it in there. Once we have the image there, we can use the image tag, the HTML image tag, which is just img. And then we can set an ID for this as well, which is going to be the iPhone image. src is going to be the source of the image here. And again, it will be a similar thing where we go back a directory and then go to the assets, and then we're going to find that image. You can also right click in Atom and copy the project path. And if you paste that in, it'll get you basically what you need. Then we can get a class here, and we're going to just call this image fluid and make sure to end that image tag. So if you save this and come back here, reload the page, you'll see the image is much too big. So to fix that, you can also just set the size of the image. So since we gave this iPhone image ID, and actually that needs to be ID, not if, we can go down here in our style and use that, and we can just set a max height to be, I think 80 of the view height. So we want it to be 80%, which is essentially saying 80% of the screen size. So that looks pretty good. If we X out of this, you'll notice it does stay over here on the left because it is in that column. Now you'll notice how close it is to the top, which adding a padding top of 4, you'll see drops that down a little bit. And then also adding a my auto is going to set the margin to be auto, which essentially in this screen size doesn't really make a difference, but basically that's going to add equal margin on the top and bottom of this. So that is looking pretty good for that column. The next thing we'll do is actually go ahead on our left side and we can add our title. Let's create another div here, and this we want to have text center. I'm just going to go ahead and add that's the margins and padding now. So the margin bottom we want to be 3. We can add an h1 tag, which is like the title tag for our site, and give this a class of display 3, which is going to just increase the size of it. And this is all bootstrap related classes, so you can go search that there. Here we're going to use a component from Vue, and this is more just as an example. So if we set this here as title, this is actually, we can bind this to a JavaScript variable with Vue. So this is just to demonstrate some cool properties with Vue and things you can do. So let's go ahead and add the subtitle, and then we'll come back to that title. So for the H3, we'll add the subtitle, find the world. I don't know, I don't love that subtitle, but we'll keep it for now. So with this title tag here, if we go down into the JavaScript part of our data object here, where our data object is, and actually there is nothing set in here right now. And if you notice, well, the page isn't loading now because this isn't set, but we were getting a JavaScript error in the console. And that's just because data wasn't returning anything. So we do want to return some values for that. So the only value we have right now that we would use is that title value, and we can set that to the name of our app. Now if you reload this, you'll see it's using that title that we set down there. So if you were to change this to something different, it does change right there. Again, this example is not, like, the title's never going to change, so it's not really necessary to put it as a variable like this, but it is something you can do. The one thing that we will change is when this goes mobile, you'll see the title down here is actually getting dropped below the phone, and really we want that to be above the phone when it's mobile. We can do that a few ways. The best way to do it, because of the additional content that's going to be below this, is to actually create 2 different divs, and one will be a mobile version and one will be the desktop version. All this code we just wrote right here, we can copy it and put it right above this image here. So if you were to save this and go back, you'll see now it is there on top, but we don't want this to be here if the screen size is large. So we only want that to be there on the medium version. So within this div here, we can give it 2 more classes, and it's going to be D block and then D large none. That should be a D. So basically what this is saying is if the screen size is large, don't show this div. And then very similarly, but oppositely, we're going to do that here, and we're going to give it, instead of D block, it will be D none by default, and then this will be D large block. So this is basically saying don't show this on small screens, but once we get to a large size screen, then show it. And this is the left column, or this is the right column, so we do want this to show then. So if you save it, everything looks the same on the desktop how it was, but when we shrink this down, you'll see now the title is up there because it's using that other div, and then the one down here is no longer there. The next thing we want is to add that card here. So again, that would be this card. That's only going to be on the right side, and it's always going to be on the right side. So we're not going to have to do that D block stuff that we just did. After, make sure you're outside of the div that is distinguishing that. So come down out of that div, but you still want to be in the call large 6 div that is for the right side. And then you can create a new div. Bootstrap does have some classes for cards, but we're not actually going to use that. We're just going to put a border on it, and we're going to give it some padding. The padding is going to change based on the screen size. So on the small screens, we want the padding to be 3. On the larger, medium up, we want it to be 5. And then we're going to have the background of this be white, and adding the rounded class here will round the corners of it and then put a shadow. The shadow class will give us like a little bit of a shadow, which makes it pop out a little bit. So that should be our card. If we do an H2 then, which will be the H2 tag, we can write the coming soon title, and then we can actually add our form. So you can add the form tag here. And this is going to be kind of changed a bit later when we actually get the form working. It will, we are going to have to do some more work on this to bind it to the Vue elements and actually get it working. So for now, I'm just going to put some basic information in this so we can see the input and the label. Form group will be the class there. We can add a label, and the label for can be email sign up. Within this label, we're going to want to put the text, and I do have that already typed out here, so that's that. And then we're going to have an input as well, and the input is just going to be, it's going to have that ID. Make sure the ID of this is the same as what you put for the for here, and that will link them together. And then we can put a placeholder here for now, and it could be enter email. And for now, we'll leave that input pretty basic. We will come back and update that a bit. I also have that line that I'm just going to copy now that says we won't share your email address. We can see what it looks like now. This is the label up here, and then there is the input. You notice the input really doesn't look the same as it does here. So there's a little bit of style we'll need to add to that. Really all it is within this input, and we're going to kind of start structuring this like this, because we are going to add a few things to it. Within this input, we can give it a class, and it's just form control. And that should actually update that to use the bootstrap version of the form. Next thing we need is that button. It's just the submit button, and you'll see there it is there. All right, we might just want a slight bit of padding on, or actually a margin top, maybe of 3 above the button, and that looks pretty good. Cool. So then if you resize your screen here, you'll see that card is right there. But we do want to put a little bit of a margin above that as well. We actually want the margin on this column. So the second column, first we can do my auto, and that will center everything in the middle, and then we can put a padding top of 4. So if you go back in here, now we have that space there, which looks better. And then if you come back here, doing that my auto actually got this lined up. This actually got this lined up in the center here before it was up towards the top. So that is looking good. It looks closer like this. You'll notice we still don't have these images down here, so let's add those real quick. If we go back in where our form was, we have this div for the form. After that, we're going to actually do a new div, which will be, the class for this is just going to be padding of 2, and we're going to give it an ID as well, and that ID is going to be available. And this is just going to have those 2 icons. They don't actually link to the App Store yet or the Google Play Store, but eventually they will. This, let me just go ahead and copy and paste in and put a div there, and then we have 2 images, which I need to actually import. These images you can get from, you can get these images from both Apple and Google. You'll notice we have another row within this, so it's a row with 2 columns. The columns, you'll notice, are always, there's no large or medium. It's always going to be 2 columns regardless of the screen size. And then we have the Apple one floating to the right and the Google one floating to the left. This seems a little bit confusing because the Apple one is going to be on the left, but we want it to float to the right so that within its column, it is on the right side of its column. So it's in the left column, and then we want it to be on the right side of the left column. And then we do have we have this new class here, App Store Image, that we are going to add a little bit of CSS for. All that's going to do is set the height. So if we do App Store Image, we want these heights to be consistently a max height of 80 pixels. That'll just keep things consistent regardless of the screen size. So if we save that, you'll see that looks pretty good there. And then if you shrink it, you'll notice that they do get smaller, but it is always in that 2 columns. All right, so that is this first card. I mean, this is looking essentially exactly like the live version, our end product. So now we can continue on to this next part, which is going to be this about information. And this is actually relatively simple compared to the top part. The top part by far is the most complex layout of the site. And again, this is like a very simple site, so it's not even that complex. But this is just a 3-column row, a row with 3 columns, and it has 1 image and text. So let's just code that whole thing out right now, and then we'll talk about it. So again, where this app homepage is, let's go and shrink that down so we don't have to look at all that code. If we go into the about ID now, and there is just one thing we want to add to this class, or to this ID class in the CSS, and that is to give it a height. We always want that height to be at least 40% of the view. So min height is going to be 40 of the view height. And this is similar to what we've done with the iPhone height, as well as what we did with full height. So if you'll remember, homepage actually has full height, which is 100% of the view height, and now we want this one to be 40%. So that's good. If you came back here, you could see that that block should now be interesting. So that did not update. Okay, min height, not width. So save that, and you'll see now that yellow block is that size. We do want that to be white, so go ahead and remove the background warning, put BG light. Another thing with the padding here, we want this to be actually 3 if on the small screens, and then padding on the medium screens and up we can do 5. And that's something you can play around with, but it does work nicely with the example I'm giving. All right, so a new div within the about here, and this will be a row, and then within the row we're going to have another div, and this will be a column. So if you remember, there's the 3-column layout. We really only want this to show on the large screens. On anything smaller than large, like the medium and small screens, we want it to just stack up. So the row would go essentially vertically. So because of that, we can just do call large here. And we don't need to set a number because all 3 of our divs are going to be called large, and that will just by default divide them evenly. The images for this, we're going to create a new folder over here, and we're going to call it icons. And this is just a way to organize this a little bit better. And I have the 3 icons that I'm going to be using as SVGs. And these I've also downloaded from, you see SVGs you can't view in here because they show up as the code. But the 3 icons here I downloaded from flaticon.com, and just make sure again with the licensing and all of that, you're going to want to put you're required to put this type of attribution to the icon there. So go ahead and do that. And then for this, it'll be the image. So the image will look like this. The first one is the app one, which I have the app, and I have the piggy bank, and I have the passport. All right, the image is there. Let me actually just copy out what all of this text will look like. All right, so you can see I have my 3 different images. Each of them are in a call large, and then I have my text block for each one of them just wrapped within the H5 div. So if you save this and go back, you'll see they do look just like the other site. And as you shrink down, you'll notice at this large screen, it's still in the 3 columns. As soon as you get to the medium size, they break up into the vertical row, which I think looks best. So that's that block there. The next thing is going to be our contact page, which is very simple and pretty similar to what we put up here. So I'm not going to code all of that out. I'm just going to copy it over, and then I can talk about it a little bit. All right, so again, this is just a simple form for now. We're going to go over more how to actually make the contact form work in a different video, but basically it's just the title, and then we have a simple input and text area, and you can see it does look like that. Let's go ahead and change the background of this using that contact ID. So I want the color to be contact, and I want the color to be this darker blue, which is just one of my app colors, you need to remove this BG info, which is there because that's overriding it. Now it's more of this greener color. The last thing is to add that footer, which is also a very relatively simple one. Well, so for the footer here, remove the BG primary, and the footer we want to be, let's set the color real quick as well. So another class down here, the background color, this is basically a black. So within the footer here, I use the footer element here, and then I have a link that is actually linking to build the app, which actually just links to the YouTube page. Probably you don't need that, but if you want to link to something else, you can do that easily with a link like this. Target blank is actually going to allow it to open a new tab, which is nice because you don't want people to actually, depending on what you're linking to, you don't necessarily want them to leave your current site. So you'll see, I can show you as an example. If they click build this app, it opens in a new tab, so this app is always here as well. Anyway, the privacy policy, that's linked, but it's actually a link to nothing right now. I'll go over the privacy policy as well in another video, so that can just stay there for now. This will be necessary before the app is actually launched, but you don't need it at this point for the landing page. This is just giving you the copyright. So yeah, that's it. Now our app is laid out just how we would want it to be. You can see it also works nicely on mobile, and everything is working as expected. Again, a nice tool to use. If you do the inspector and click this mobile icon, you can test it on mobile here, and you can also change the screen sizes. I like to definitely test the iPhone 5 because it is a very small screen size. So if it works on this, if it looks good on this, it'll generally look good on all the other mobile devices as well. All right, so now that our landing page layout is set up, we want to actually get the functionality working for this join waiting list. And the goal here is really to collect users' emails. And the way we're going to do this is actually to create their account for them. So since we've been setting our app up with Firebase, we're really just going, when they enter their email, we're going to actually create them a user account for our app with an email. And really all that's going to mean is that in Firebase authentication, which we've already set up in previous videos, you see I have my test users here, but once they enter their email address on this line here and hit join waiting list, we want that to create a new user here with email. So it'd be similar to this email here. And that way we'll be able to, once the app is live, we'll be able to send them an email that basically says, you know, your account has already been reserved. You can reset your password here, and then they'll already have their account. So back in our command line here, we're going to install Firebase tools, and this is another npm package. So this will allow us to interact with Firebase from our command line. Okay, once that's done, then we're going to actually install Firebase as the npm package into our Vue app. So do make sure you're in the directory of the Vue app that we've been working in. And this will install that new Firebase package. So to confirm that that's been installed, if you go into your code, you can see your packages .json file has been updated. I recently just checked this into Git, so now I see the differences in the color of the file. So yeah, but you can see it's there in your dependencies. These files you shouldn't edit manually. Instead, you should just do it through npm in the command line. So now that that's there, we can use Firebase commands in the command line, and the first one we'll do is Firebase login. And you're going to want to log into, I'm already logged in, so you're going to want to log into the account that you use to for Firebase. So the account that you're using to log into see this view. Now you can use, since we're in this folder, again for our project, we can do Firebase init. All right, so here you can go through and choose what you are going to want. Right now, we can just select hosting. We are going to use functions as well later, so select that. We're not going to use Firestore or the database, and neither, really just hosting and functions is what you're going to want to select. So use the spacebar to select those and then hit enter. And then it's going to ask you if you want to use an existing project or create a new project. Do use an existing project, so that hit enter there. Then it'll list your Firebase projects with that you have under this Firebase account that you're logged in with. The one that I've been using is the travel budget one, so we'll go with that. Then it's asking you if you want to use JavaScript or TypeScript. We'll go with JavaScript. And then you could hit no to ESLint, hit yes to installing the npm dependencies. You'll notice these 3 new files will have been created within your project directory. The functions one, which we're actually not going to touch right now, we can use that later. Then it's going to ask you what you want to use for your public directory, and you can just keep it with public. Configure as a single page app. You can hit yes to this because in this example we will be doing a single page app. But the main thing here is that it now created these configuration files for us. So if you go in, you can see we have our Firebase configuration file that has our Firebase, this is the actual name of our Firebase project right here. And then this JSON object as well is kind of going to be used more for when we're deploying the app and hosting it. But either way, just make sure that this is set correct, which it should be if you just went through all of that correctly. All right, so the app is not quite fully set up yet. We still need to add our credentials into the project. In the src folder here, we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it Firebase. And now within this folder, we can create a new file, and we're going to call this credentials.js. And this is what that file is going to need to contain. So this file here, all this information you can find in your Firebase app. So if you go to your project overview, you're going to want to add a new app here and choose the web version of the app. And this we can just call, you can call it anything you want. Landing page is what I'll go with. And we're going to also set up the Firebase hosting for this. So register the app there. These scripts that it's telling you to copy, you're actually not going to need to do that because of the way we're configuring it with Vue. It will do that for us. You can see this is something we already did, and then we actually already did this stuff as well. So we can continue to the console. We didn't do the deploy part yet. If you go to your apps here now and you go to the app that you just created, you can go to the settings of it, and right down here, if you click on config, you're going to get the config information that you need. So I have this all blurred out right now, but you're going to copy all this information to your app and replace it in the location that I was just showing you. So I'm going to leave this blank, and I'm going to off camera fill this in myself. And if you are pulling this down from GitHub, you're going to need to fill this in yourself as well. All right, so I recreated the file. My credentials file.js right here is set with my actual credentials, and I've added that to my git ignore. So that's not going to be checked into GitHub. If you are using GitHub, which I recommend you do, you should do the same thing. I created another version of this file with all blank values. So basically, because this credentials file won't be in GitHub, so if I ever need to use this again, or even if you're pulling this from GitHub, you'll at least see what the example needs to look like. So now that our credentials are set, we can go into the main.js file. We're going to import using the Firestore plugin from Vuefire. And actually, before we do that, we need to install that package in Vuefire, which is called Vuefire. Which allows Vue to talk to Firebase. So this is also an npm package, and it's just called Vuefire. All right, and now that that's been installed, we can go in here, and we'll do this before Bootstrap. We're going to call import, and it's Firestore plugin, Firestore plugin from Vuefire. Down here, we actually need to tell Vue to use that Firestore plugin. All right, so now the app is essentially configured for Firebase. So we can now have it do some stuff. We're going to create a new file over here as well. And we can call this app.js. So this app.js file is actually what we're going to use to create that instance of Firebase within our app. So everything we've done so far has configured it to be usable in the app. This is going to actually have it be used. So it's pretty simple. It's going to be these 3 lines of code. So we're importing Firebase and we're importing that credentials file that we created right here. And then we're creating this app constant that is going to be an instance of Firebase. So you'll notice we're going to be using this app constant in the next files that we create. Speaking of the next files, let's create another new file. This one's going to be the auth. So this one is going to create the instance of our Firebase Auth. I'll paste this in here as well. So this is going to be using that app constant that we just created over here. So we're going to get, basically we're getting our Firebase instance, and we're also going to be importing this new auth package here. And now we can export this this constant auth, and that's just going to be an instance of from the instance of Firebase. We're going to be calling an instance of auth. So this keeps it so that everything is a little bit separate, but really what we're doing is just creating these essentially global variables, because we can then use this auth file here and this auth constant throughout our app, and we'll have that instance of auth that way. So similar to how we're doing this with auth, if you were going to use this for Firestore and actually connect to your database and do that, you would do a very similar thing, except you would just call Firestore here instead of auth, and obviously import that package. But that's not really going to be what we're covering in this video. So moving on, now Firebase is configured, so we can use this auth constant on our, and make sure we save these files. We use that auth constant on our, let me close out all of these and clean it up a little bit, back on our homepage view. So back on our homepage view, if we go down to the JavaScript area of it, which is within our script tags, the first thing we're going to do is import that auth constant that we just created. So we're going to import here, and it's going to be auth. And the reason we can import this is because we're exporting it here. So since we're exporting it as a constant, we can import it in other areas of the app later, which is exactly what we're doing here. So we import auth, and we're going to tell where we're importing that from. So it's going to be from that file, which is, and this at here is basically saying from the root path of the source, and then within that we have that folder called Firebase, and then within that it's in our auth folder, auth.js, not folder, file, sorry. So now that we have auth import into our home page component, we can actually use that to actually get this form set up to use Firebase Auth and authenticate a user. All right, so this email field and this button are the only 2 real components that we're going to need for the auth to work properly. So we are going to need to bind these to data elements in our JavaScript of the Vue app. So similar to how we have the title set like this, we're going to do the same thing for the email. And we're going to set that blank to begin with. We're going to do another one for a message, which is really going to be like an error message. And that one we're also going to set to be blank. With the email one now, we need to bind this to the form input field. So if we go back up to our form here, and you can find where we have the email, you'll see here's our email input right here. So there's a few things we need to do with this. The ID is good. We're going to, before the ID, we're actually going to use a Vue model. So this is how we actually bind that element. You use v model, and we'll set that equal to email. Now this email here is the email that we just set down here. So it's just slightly confusing because I guess we're naming these variables all the same, but that is that variable. So if you name it differently down there, you want to bind it differently here. This type is going to be email. Now this type email here is just HTML. We could have had this before, but we didn't, but that's just HTML. Having this type email is going to it's going to help with browser support in that the browser will know that this is expecting an email address, and Chrome and Safari and Firefox, all these modern browsers have functionality built in where if it knows it's an email field, it can auto-populate it, for instance, and it'll also do a little bit of verification for you. We'll set up some verification ourselves, but it's nice to keep these types set to what you actually are using them for. Another example for this is if you're using it on your iPhone, the keyboard will change slightly, so it'll have the @ symbol and all that kind of stuff. So that all happens because of this type being email. Anyway, though, we're also going to add another div down here, and we'll do this real quick right now for that message. So this is just going to be, we're going to give it a margin top of 4. So there's a little bit of space, and then we're just going to have a paragraph here. We'll give this the class of no margin, actually. So margin 0. And then in here is where we're just going to display that message. So since the message is nothing, this should look the same right now. But if you were to go in and put something here and save it, you'll see that we get that message there. So that's where we'll put an error or if they sign in or if they sign up correctly, we'll also display a message that says, you know, we got your email. That's all to come. So clear that back out. All right, so now our input field is bound to a email variable in JavaScript, and now we want to basically bind this button to a function. So once the email is filled out and the button is clicked, we want a function to be triggered. So since the button is of type submit and it's on a form, the way you do that is actually with a submit. You actually bind the whole form's submit action to a function. So that'll look like this. Submit, and then you call prevent and have that equal a function that you want to call. So this was spelled wrong. We're going to call that function add email. And then we're going to pass a parameter to that function, and that will be the email. And the email that we're passing to it is going to be this email variable right here. And since it's part of the form, it will be looking in the form for a bound variable, and it'll use that email right there. So this is good. We need to create this function now. So the form part is done. Back in the JavaScript part down here, we're going to create a new section, which is methods. And this is all how Vue is set up. So you have within this default, you have your data, you can have methods. There's other things you can have as well, but these are the only two we're going to be using right now. So within this, we're going to create that function, which is going to be add email. And this is going to be an asynchronous function because it is going to be making a call to Firebase. So define async in the beginning. And if you've been following along with the Flutter stuff, this is all the same concepts of asynchronous functions and submitting stuff from a form. In Flutter, we do it on the button click, but this is on the form submit, but it's very similar concepts. But anyway, let's write this function out. Firstly, let's set that notice. So that is I'm going to set that right here. So this notice message is what we're going to display again in that message field if the user is logged in successfully. If there's an error with Firebase, it will give us that error back, and we'll set the notice message to that instead. So now we're actually going to make our call to Firebase, and we're going to use await. So again, this is async await, very similar to Dart. And we're going to call auth, which is that auth variable that we pulled in here. And then we can do create user with email and password. This is a function of auth that is already part of the Firebase package that we installed. Then we can just pass that email address, which is the email that we're getting passed in from the form. And then we're going to need a password here. So for this example right now, I'm going to just use password, and then we're going to update that. Right after this, we're going to catch the errors. So if the user is not created successfully, which this could happen for a number of reasons, one being the email is badly formatted, another being that the user already exists, so on and so on. But Firebase is going to be able to handle all that for us, which is really nice. but we can catch that error and display it to the user. So catch here, and then we're going to call a function of error. So error here, this error variable is going to be what is returned from the function. So this catch block here is only going to get called if there's an error with this function here. So this isn't going to get called if the call is successful. If the call is not successful, then we're going to be within this block right here. So then we're going to be within this function, which essentially means we have an error. And this error here is basically just a parameter. You could call that whatever you want. The thing we want to do now is we'll know that something went wrong at this point. So if it did, we're going to overwrite this notice message here, and we're going to set it equal to the error dot message. That will basically then display that message to the user, whatever the error was. Okay, you'll see we do have a slight syntax error here. Okay, I spelt method wrong. And it's going to be methods with an S and then a colon here. And this is not going to be there. So it is a little different than data. So this is how that should look. And now that's saving there. So this should be working right now. So as an example, you'll see if I'll sort these by created. Again, these are all test accounts. I'm going to go with the email dave@test1.com, and if I hit join waitlist, okay, so it is not quite working. So let's hit inspect here, and you'll see we have some errors down the side here. If we click on the console tab, we'll see the errors more specifically. We're still kind of getting an error with the way that is called, so I'm thinking we might need to just refresh. And then I'll try that email again. So you'll see post to that. All right, so let's debug this a little bit. If we comment all this out and we console, if you type log, it'll do console.log, and we'll say we are in the function. And then let's also log out the email. So let's refresh this. We'll try that same email address again. So we do have both the variables, so that's good. I'm thinking possibly there's a typo then somewhere in here. Let's go ahead and log in here as well. And try one more time. All right, so we're getting an error calling the function for sign up new user. All right, so actually this post does seem to be working, and we're getting into that error block. So the reason that this is looking like an error, if you actually click into it and click into this here, you can see some more details about it. The error message here is that the email exists. So that is good because that means that the user was created, which it was. So there actually isn't any problems here. The only problem is that our message isn't displaying down here, which is why I initially thought there was an error. But it really isn't actually an error. And as you can see, this is good though to know that you could console log stuff out here. I think that's useful. That's useful for debugging yourself. So let's remove those logs, but you'll notice this notice message here that we're setting equal to that is not actually, we're not actually setting it equal to this message variable. So pretty much after this whole call is made, which would be after this line, we're going to set this dot message equal to the notice message, and that should get the message displaying. And then we're also going to set the email equal to an empty string. So we're basically going to clear out that email form again. So now if we go back and if we enter that same email address and hit join waiting list, you'll see now it just said it has that error there, which is what this is erroring on, is basically saying the email address is already in use by another account. Now, and you'll notice, see if there's no email there and you just hit join, you'll get that error that it's a badly formatted email. I don't think when someone clicks, enters their same email and hits join that it should say that it's already in use. I think it should still say that your account has been reserved. So it's kind of like, it's been reserved. If you try and reserve it again, it doesn't matter, it's already been reserved. But the way we can do that is actually by excluding that error from our notice message here. So we can exclude this with a simple if statement. which is going to be if the error code, and you could find these in the Firebase documentation, but if the error code equals auth email already in use, then we're going to, okay, so this is basically, since we're using a not equals here, we're saying as long as this error code is not the error for an email already being in use, then we're going to show the error message. If not, then notice message is not going to get overwritten, so it's going to give us this notice message. So if you save this again and type in that same one that already exists and hit join, you'll see it does say your account has been reserved. And if you do a new email too, with another one or something, in join waitlist, it will say that the email has been, or that your account has been reserved. And if you go back over here and refresh this, you'll see we should have those 2 new users. If you sort by created, you'll see we do have these 2 new users from our sign up page here. Some part of this that is very insecure is just setting the default password as password. Instead of doing that, we can actually set it to a random string of password. This isn't really a high vulnerability at this moment, but it's not a good practice to ever do this. So, because really the way that these accounts are going to work is someone's going to create this account, then we have their account in Firebase, right? And then when the app actually goes live, we're going to email all these people, and we're going to say, we're going to send them a link to the app and tell them that they can go reset their password, and then they'll have their account. So that's going to be kind of their first experience in the app, is resetting their password in the app. And it's not great to have everyone's password be password to begin with. So to begin with, it'll just be like a random generated password, which doesn't actually matter because we're never going to log into their account, and we don't need to know what that random password is. So that's kind of the point of doing a random one. After this function, we're going to need a comma, and then we can create a new function down here, and we'll call it random password. And this will take a parameter of length. Let's first set a variable called characters or chars, and we're going to set this equal to all the potential characters that we want in the password. So I will copy this over. This is just all the letters in the alphabet, all these symbols, and then all the uppercase letters and all the numbers. We can set the variable password equal to an empty string. Now we can create a little for loop, and we're going to run through the length of this. So we can use x, I guess, for x starting at 0. So that'll be the beginning of our index. This is just basic writing of a for loop in JavaScript. We're going to go through the length that's passed in there, and then we're going to increase by 1. So all this is saying is if we pass in 10 here, we're just going to loop through 10 times. Let's go ahead and log out the x variable here, and let's also log out a math.random, just so we can see what that looks like. So we're going to actually need to call random password here. So let's just do it on this add email. For now, let's comment out all of that and just call this function. For the length, let's actually pass in a length. We need to actually use this on it because we are calling random password, which is a function within this Vue component. So we're calling it on this component, this meaning this component. So this component's function of random password. Because this is an async function, await this, cool. So now you'll see we get 0 through 9 because we entered 10, and then our math.random is giving us this random string, or this random number here. So we want this number to actually be, we want to be able to get a random digit of this string. So to get a random variable of this string, what we can do is we can get a random number that is within the length of this, and then we can use that random number to get the index of the string, the index of the value of the string at that number. So for instance, if we were able to get the number 3, which would be the 4, it would be 0, 1, 2, 3, we could get the letter D out of it. So it's a little confusing. Let me write it out, and then when it's printed, I think you'll see. So firstly, we're going to call on this, we're going to wrap it in a math.floor. So that's going to convert this to a integer, because if you remember before, it was not an integer. And we're going to multiply this by the length of the characters here. So it'll be chars.length. And if we log this out now, it'll just be a number. It should just be like a whole number. There, that looks good. We can remove the X value from being printed, but you can see if we do this one more time, it's just going to be printing us a random number between 1 and the length of that character, which this is probably like 60 characters. So you'll notice it's like between roughly 1 and 60. So now we can use that to actually get the character in this string at that index. So let's log out this as well, and we'll just say chars.char at, and then we're going to say the character at this. So instead of logging this anymore, we're going to set this to a variable. So we can call this this is really the index, so we can call it the I, and then don't forget to remove that from the print statement. So then we can say the character at I, and now when we print it, it should be some random character of there. So refresh that, hit the button. Yeah, and you can see we're getting just random characters. If we increase this to 20 and do the same thing, you'll see we just get a random 20 characters. So instead of logging this out, we're going to actually append it to this variable. So we're going to say that this variable plus equals the character there, and don't forget to remove that. And then after this for loop, for now, let's just so we can see it, let's log the password. And now if we refresh this and hit join, you'll see we're always getting just a random 20 character password. So that's perfect. Instead of logging this, we're going to actually return it. And then up here we can uncomment all of this stuff, because again, we were just doing this for testing, but we can take this call to the password here, and instead of setting the password to just password, we can set it to a random 20 character string. So yeah, this should work exactly the same. If I do another one with 22, hit join waiting list, that will be there. I mean, the way that you could test this is if you have your Flutter app already set up, you can go and log in with this user's account, or you could go log in with this user's account, and you'll see that you'll know their password was password, because that was what it was set to. This one, you're not going to know their password because it's just a random string. If you were to print out that string as well, instead of just returning this, you could print it and return it, and then you would know the password and you could test that. But the whole point of this is just to set up these accounts with a random password so that no one's ever going to be able to log into it without resetting the password. So that's what this will accomplish, and it is now actually complete. So I think at this point, our join waiting list reserve your account feature is now set up. All right, so in the last video, we actually did configure the Firebase functions, but if you're just joining in on this video, you're going to want to add first off, you're going to need the Firebase tools, which you could do with npm install -g Firebase tools. But after you log in with Firebase, you can run Firebase init functions. Again, my app already has this, so you can see it it should already have it essentially, but I'll just choose JavaScript again and no to ESLint, and it already exists. You want to overwrite it. I'm just going to say no because it's basically the same thing. So you should already have it if you've been following along, but if not, you can add in the Firebase functions. You're going to have this functions folder up here back in your code, and that is going to have an index.php Vue.js file. So this file here we're going to be able to use to create a Firebase cloud function, and that cloud function is going to be responsible for sending an email to us actually. So again, this is all going to be for this contact us form. So if someone enters their email address and a message, we want that email to be sent to us. So there are other ways to do this. Like you could just save it to Firestore, and then you could just go look in the database at what the message was. But it's definitely nicer to have that message be emailed to you. And this functionality, setting this up, leaves for a lot of potential to, if you wanted to, send an email also to the user. So we're not going to be covering that part, but you could easily modify this to do that. All right, so there is one other package we're going to need, and we're actually going to be installing this within the functions directory. So you'll notice that the functions directory actually has its own packages, or its own package.json. So this is actually separate from the package.json file that the Vue app itself has. So these, this functions directory, which is specifically related to the cloud functions for Firebase, has its own set of dependencies. So make sure that you change to the functions directory by changing directory cd into functions. And then from in here, you're going to want to install the node mailer package. So you're going to use npm, and that should get installed, and you should see that these two files get updated. If these two files didn't get updated, and you'll only notice this if you have this checked into get, then that means you did it wrong. You don't want your base package.json and the JSON lock getting updated there. So we can go ahead and delete all. This kind of gives you an example of how you can create a new function, but we're going to just delete this and create our own. All right, so we're going to need two new required fields here. So we already had functions by default. Admin is going to allow us to access Firebase admin, which is going to be necessary for actually creating the cloud function. And then the node mailer is going to allow us to actually send the email from that cloud function. This line here is going to initialize the admin for the app. So that's basically all the setup we'll need. Now we're going to need to create a transporter or actually just a transport is what it's called, for node mailer. So let me bring up the docs right here. This is the node mailer docs. A transport is essentially what is going to be used to send the email. Our Node app or our Vue app or any JavaScript app by itself is not going to be capable of sending an email. So we're going to need some other provider to send the email. So I'm going to be using SendGrid in this example and showing you that, but really the core of it is it's going to be set up with a single connection. So we're going to be setting this up right here. And all this is really doing is saying what should we use to send the email with? So what provider should we use to send the email with? So we can actually just copy this. And again, that's going to be SendGrid for this case. We're going to set this equal to a variable first off. So let's do that and say let transporter equal this node mailer. We can delete this. These examples here are going to need to be filled in with our actual information from SendGrid. So let me actually bring you into the SendGrid console and I'll show you what that's like. This is my SendGrid account that I created for this project specifically. What you're going to do is, first off, just go over to SendGrid and create an account. And I'll link down below the link to SendGrid and all of that. You're going to go to settings here and you're going to go to API keys. Now this would be my live key, but I'm going to create, for this example, I'm just going to create a new key that I can use, and using this new key will allow me to use it in this tutorial and not have to worry about blurring it out. You're going to want to give this full access, and then you can hit create in Vue. So now you'll be able to see the key here, and they're only going to show it to you once. So you're going to copy that, and that is actually going to become the password. So it's going to be the password of your account. And because we're using SMTP and this simple setup for all of this, you can use, you're gonna need to change the host to be smtp.sendgrid.net. The port will stay the same, false will stay the same, and then the user is actually going to be API key. And now you should be configured to send emails through SendGrid. So I'll hit done on this. And now we need to actually create our Firebase Cloud function. So that's pretty simple to do too. You call export here, or exports actually, and then you name your function. So whatever you want to name the function is what you're going to call it here. So send email is what I'm going to call it, and this is just going to equal a new functions request. So that's going to look like this. So we're going to have a new, when we deploy this, we'll have a new Firebase function that's called send email. So now we need to actually get this to send the email to ourselves. First, we're going to set the email from address. So essentially how this is going to work is we're going in our home view, we're going to be setting the email from and the message and passing it into this function. But for now, let's just set the email from being, we're going to just hard code these values, and then we're going to come back and update that to actually work in the app. So for the email from, let's just use that dave1@test.com, and then we're also going to need a message here. All right, and now we want to set actually the mail options, and those mail options are what's going to be used and passed to the transporters. These are essentially, it's just going to be the to, from, and the subject and content of the mail, or of the email. So we'll start with from, and the from is going to be this email from. The from actually is not going to be from this email from. The from is going to be from our SendGrid user account. So in SendGrid, because again, the way that we're setting up this email is that this is going to be an email that's sent to us, essentially from us as well. So if you go into your email and you go and look at the settings, you're going to need to go into the sender authentication. So really you wouldn't want to do this with a Gmail account, but that's what I have it set up right now with. You're going to need to verify your single sender verification, or really ideally is your domain authentication, but I haven't done that yet, and you don't need to do that at this point in the app either, but you are going to need a verified domain here. So the from is going to be this address here, and this is important because if the email doesn't come from this address, then SendGrid is going to block it, because SendGrid is not going to allow you to send from non-verified accounts. Hopefully that makes sense. So anyway, the from address is going to be, actually, in this case, the from address is going to be my one-man startup email. And this needs to be a string. The way you can also set these up is with emails, you can set the name to display. So it'll look like it comes from Travel Treasury, but the email address that's used is actually going to be that. Okay, that works. And then the to is going to be, I'm actually just going to send it to this email address as well. I'm going to send it to this email account, but this would be where you actually want these contact emails to go. So this is where you'll receive them. Then the subject will be Travel Treasury contact form submission. And the HTML is going to be, this will be like the body of the email itself. We can use this backtick to do string interpolation in JavaScript. So then you can use $, and we'll say the message. So it'll be this value here for message. And then we're going to do actually a break. We're going to do 2 breaks. So it's like enter essentially, and then we're going to say from, and we'll put the email from there. So the email from will actually just be in the body of the message, and this is important because we're going to want to know who to respond to. When the email comes into my inbox, it's going to go into my onemanStartup@gmail.com inbox, and it's going to come from essentially that same email. And then it's going to have the message and the actual sender's from email there. So when I respond, I'll know the response needs to go to this email. Now we need to actually set this mail options to send through this transporter. So to do that, we call this transporter variable here, and we're going to call send mail on it. And then we're going to pass it the mail options. And the second parameter are options with error and info. And really this doesn't mean the email sending. Like the email will send here. And this is similar to what we were doing before with like the catch block. This is kind of what's in here is kind of like the catch block. So if there's an error, and you'll see this in a second, we can essentially, let's just log it and we'll respond with the error. So that's all this is doing. So we're going to log to our console that there was an error, and we'll have the error message. And then we're going to do this response.send is not actually going to send the email, because the email will not get sent if we're in this part here. The way that these cloud functions work, this is important to note, the way these cloud functions work is it is just an HTTP request. So this is going to send a request, and that request is going to need to give a response back. So the request is going to come into the send email function. It's going to perform all this stuff, and this send email function is expected to give a response. So that's what this response is here. So we're just going to send that error as a string to the response. I mean, there's no real value in sending the error as a string right now, but that's what we'll do for now. You could set in some other logic later that will catch those errors and actually do different things on the user's end and show them different stuff if it didn't work, but we're not really going to worry about that in this video. If there was no error, then the response is just going to be that the message was sent successfully. Again, this is not something that we're actually going to be showing the user, but this is something that this cloud function needs to have. It needs to have a response. At this point, the function is actually set up to send the email. So really what we want to do is deploy it. So we're going to save this file, and then we're going to go back into our terminal here, and within this function's directory still, we're just going to run Firebase deploy. And this isn't going to deploy our app, but it is going to deploy our cloud function. So if you read kind of what's going through here, it's preparing the functions directory, and then it's packaging the functions directory. And it'll take a little bit, but once it is deployed, if we go back into our Firebase here and we go to functions, you're going to see we have a new function here called send email, which is the one we just deployed. If you went into this before that, there would have been nothing here. You'll see there's this node 8 is depreciated. We could fix that real quick actually by going into the packages JSON and change this from node 8 to node 12 and just save that. And then the function is still actually being deployed. So give this a second and then just deploy it again. Okay, when I try to deploy that again, you see I get this error note that it needs either node 8 or node 10. So this was a typo. It should be node 10, not 12. And then go ahead and deploy that again. That will just get that'll get us on the newer version of Node, which is going to be depreciated eventually. So it's a good idea to do that. All right, so that's complete now. We can go back into the Firebase console and reload the page, and you'll see where that error is gone. So here's the thing with these cloud functions. They're actually they are, as I was saying, just HTTP requests. So you'll see this is the trigger right here. So if we go and copy this into a new tab, it's actually going to run the function for us. So you'll see we get that message back here that says your message was submitted successfully, which again is just what we're responding with when we call the function. So if everything worked right, I should have received an email. So let me pull up my email, and I did. So I have a filter on right now that's basically just going to filter for these emails, but you'll see this is expected because of the way that we have our SendGrid configuration set up. Basically what this warning here is saying is an email was sent from my email address that didn't come from Google. And since this is a Gmail account, it's marking it suspicious because it is actually not the way that a Gmail email would normally come in, but that's fine. You could ignore that. So yeah, we get the message and we get that email address that we had there. So now that we have this working, we actually need to set up our form that is on this page to send two values, and when that send email or when that send message button is clicked, it'll trigger this function. The first step to that actually is let's modify our function first. So now that you understand that this is working with a function like this, we're going to send parameters to this. So there's parameters that can be passed into this function that we can use essentially to get these values here. To access those values within this function, it's pretty simple actually. We don't need, instead of hard coding that, we can use the request here, and we can call query, and then we can call whatever we want to name that parameter. So we haven't really created the parameter yet, but we're going to call it email from. And then we're going to do very much the same thing. And we're going to just do message. And that looks good. Now this we're going to save, and everything should be fine here. We are going to need to redeploy this, so we can do that right now while we work on the next part. So redeploy that, and that's basically just going to update this function to use the request parameters. So now we can update our home page view to have the form actually link to that Firebase Cloud function. So the first step here, and this is similar to how we set up the other form, is we're going to need to create a new object here, which is going to be the contact email and the contact message. And these are both going to be just blank strings to begin with. And similar to how we had that message here, we're going to do another one with, we're going to do a contact message as well. This one we'll call it notice. So now that we have these variables, we can bind them to our contact form. I'm going to minimize that form. So now we have this form we set up earlier, but there are two inputs. Well, there's the input and the text area. So the input for the email, we're going to use that contact email. So we're going to use vModel here again. And this is going to be contact email. And then similarly for the text area, the order of this doesn't matter, but I do like to put the view binded object as the first element in it. I think it makes it easier to find. And this will be the contact message with the underscore there. So those are set up. Similarly, how we set our last form with a function, we're going to do that as well here. And this one will be, we'll call it send contact message. So this one you'll notice we're not going to pass these in because I'm going to show you another way. Really in the first one where we were passing the email in, you don't need to do it that way. These will be accessible in the JavaScript code because they're part of the data. So we only actually are going to show this form if the user didn't just submit it. So basically once the user submits this form, we want to hide the form and it'll just have a message instead. So let's set that up first, and then we're going to create this send contact message. So we can use this, we're going to add another parameter here, and we're going to call it show contact. And that will equal, it's actually going to equal true to begin with. And this will just be either true or false. So we want that to be true when you first load the page, and then we're going to set it to false once this form is submitted. This other cool thing you can do in Vue is bind those variables to a div and use vif and velse. We already have a div, which is our div right here, and we can actually put a vif on that. And we're going to say if show contact equals true, which it will when we first load the page, then we're going to be showing essentially all of this. And after this div is over, we can do an else. So we can do a new div, and this will be, we don't need a class on it. We can just do velse. And here we can just put, we're gonna put these 2 lines that the message was sent successfully and pretty much a thank you. So if you go back here and reload it, we're actually probably, okay, there's no error, so that was good. So that's when it's true. If we were to change this to false and reload, you'll see this is what it'll look like. This is what we want it to look like once the form is submit. So that's good. Set that back to true, and we will be updating that value, this value, after the form is submit. So another thing we want to do real quick in terms of the view is if there is a notice, so again, this contact notice, we're going to set any errors in the form to this contact notice field. So this is very similar to what we were doing with the message when we had the user's email, signing the user up with their email. And we just want to show that error if there is an error. This one is, we're going to do a little bit different. We're going to use another VIF. So this class we're going to call alert. And this is a bootstrap class alert and an alert warning. And that'll just make it yellow. We're going to use a VIF though here. And we're going to be saying if the show contact, or sorry, this one is not the show contact. This one is going to be if we have a contact notice. So if we have a contact notice, basically, so if our contact notice is not equal to an empty string, then we're going to display this message. And the message is going to be a little bit more in depth. So it's going to be, we're going to first say that there was a problem, and then we're going to actually say whatever the notice value is set to. So the notice value is just going to be set to whatever that problem is. So we could save that. You go back here and refresh, everything is fine. If you go in and just as an example, set this to some error, you can see the error is there. Our alert isn't actually working the way I would expect. So let me see. I spelled alert wrong here. So now you can see we have our yellow alert warning. So that looks good. So this is really going to happen when our email address is not valid, which we'll get to in a second. But for now, we can set that back to nothing. Now it's time to actually set up this function, this send contact message function. So when the form is actually filled out, it's going to send to this function, and that's where we're going to call that Firebase Cloud function. So the view is now set up. We can set this up in our methods here. We can create a new method. It looks like I'm missing an E at the end of this contact message, so update that. And again, this method takes no parameters, so that's all that is. Now, if we want to do some validation on that email, that's something we are going to want to check before we send our cloud, before we make our call to Cloud Firestore. We're actually going to do that with another function, and this is such a simple function. I'm just going to copy the whole thing and paste it here. And this is something I obviously just found online. This will validate our email and just make sure the format of it matches a typical email format. So this is, and that'll be on GitHub if you can go and copy it as well. So we're going to check that the email is valid first. If the email is not valid, then we're going to set that alert, that contact notice, to equal that the email is not valid. So let's do that very first. So if we can make this call to the validation email, and the email here is actually going to be this contact email. So this is where it's a little different. We're not passing it in as a parameter, but we can call it with this and contact email, because this in the context of this function is going to be the home view page, and contact email is going to be found within the data of the home view page. So anyway, calling this, and this is basically going to be returning the test here. So it'll be either true or false. So if it's not, and actually we're going to need a this in front of calling that function as well, because this is also part of the home page view. Basically, this will return true if the email is valid. So if the email is not valid, that would mean that we want to show that message. So using this exclamation point here is basically going to say what that will convert this to being is if
if this value is not true, so that means if it's false, which means that the email is not valid, then we want to set this dot contact notice, and we're going to set that equal to the email address was badly formatted. All right, so actually if we save this, we can test it right now. If you go and you just hit send message, the email address is badly formatted, so it will pop up with this message. If you were to refresh the page, but then actually put in an email address and hit send, you'll notice the message does not pop up, but nothing happens. So that's expected at this point of the app. The next thing that we're going to do is check that the message is actually at least 10 characters long. So to do that, we can do an else if here, and we can say this dot the contact message, because again, that is going to be, the contact message is what's bound to this text area. So if that value is, I lost my place, let's see, right here. So if the contact message if its length is less than 10 characters, and you can choose however long you want these messages to be. I don't think anyone should be sending a contact message that's less than 10 characters. So 10 characters I think is a good one. Then we're going to set, similarly, we're going to set this contact notice equal to your message is too short. And both of these are just kind of measures to try and prevent being spammed. But that's really all it is. So you can go through and come up with more validations essentially and put them all in this type of format here. But once you pass all your validations, and make sure if you do it this way, you're using if, else if, because then it will run through, it'll just run through one. Like it'll only ever give one error. So for instance, if we go in here right now and we hit submit, we're not getting both of those errors because it's hitting the first error and then it's just going to display that error. If I put my email in and then send it, now it'll give me that other error for the message being too short. So then if the message was fine and the email was fine, we can hit this last block, which is going to be our else, and this is where we're actually going to send that email. So we're going to call the Firebase function. And we can do that with, we're going to set this variable called the URL. And this, we're going to use the backtick quotes so that we can do string interpolation. But we're going to, at this point, let's actually check that our new changes were deployed. So again, those new changes being that we're going to accept parameters. So remember, we're going to have a parameter email from and message. So let's test that real quick. In the URL that we were in before, if you do a question mark, that's where you can start adding parameters. So then you're going to do email from equals, and this one will do test2@gmail.com, and then the second parameter you're going to use an @ sign, and then the parameter name for that was message. So put the message there and put equals, and we could do test, so 3 tests, and then hit enter there. You'll see it does also say that it was submitted successfully. So let's go check our inbox again, and you'll see we did get a new email, and this one did come back with the parameters that we put into that URL. So that's good. That is what we expected and what we wanted. So now we can copy, essentially we're going to be copying this URL. So copy this URL here and set that equal to, back in the home view, set that equal to the URL here. And you'll notice that the cloud function is there, so send email. The email from here, you're going to want to highlight all of that and put a $, open close bracket, and that's where we can use this contact email. And the message is very similarly, you can do a $, and do this message or contact message. All right, so now this URL is formatted for the cloud function. So we need to actually make a post request to send that URL. That can be done with fetch, which is actually built in to Vue already. So first let's set some request options, and these will be a constant, we'll call it request options. And this is just going to take two different parameters. One is the method, and that will be get. Another one is header, or headers, sorry. And this is really all that we want this to be, is the content type of JSON. So I'll just paste that in there. And that is good. Put a semicolon at the end of this, and then we can call fetch here. And we're going to fetch this URL. And we're going to pass in these request options. And that's it for that. And then once we make this call here, we're going to, if you remember how we set up that show contact being true, we're going to actually change that to be false. So that can be false, and it will hide the contact form and show that message that we put right here. All right, so I think everything should be set up to be sending an email. So we can actually X out of this and go back into our app. And this again is just running in our development mode. So I'll type in a third email. So we'll start with this one, could be test55@test.com, and then the message will be, does this work from the contact form? And if we hit send message here, it looks good so far. That was hidden. And let's check our inbox. And I just refresh it, and you'll notice it is coming from me, and that is because obviously the email address was set up as being the same thing. But yeah, it worked. I mean, there's the email from the contact form, and then if I want to reply to it, I mean, the email that was entered is right there as well. So yeah, that is basically that gets the contact page set up, so that's looking good. And now our landing page is essentially done. The only thing that's left to do is deploy it. All right, deploying the app to Firebase Hosting is actually relatively simple because we've already done a lot of the work to get it there. We're already linked with Firebase, and we're already using, we're basically already set up with Firebase Hosting. So if you actually go to this link right here, this is where our Firebase hosted app can go. And at the end of this video, I'll show you how to get your custom domain set up to point to this. All right, so if you go into your command line, you want to, in the last video, we were in the functions directory because we were working with our cloud function. So you're going to want to back out to the main directory. And then within this, you're going to run npm build, npm, if you go to the README, it actually has the command, it's npm run build, and this is going to set it up for production. Basically what this is going to do is compress your whole app into one file or a few files, and then we can send that file to Firebase. All right, so it looks like everything is set there. Now we can just do Firebase deploy. And because, as we've been going through building this, because we've already set it up with Firebase and we already linked it to our Firebase app, deploying it already knows where to deploy it. If you remember back, and I'll link to all the other videos below, if you remember, we set it up with, we set it up in this Firebase app. And when we first set up Firebase in our Vue project, we chose hosting, and we went through a few we went through a few of the configurations for hosting, but it's all very simple. But yeah, basically it'll deploy. You'll notice right now it's deploying our cloud function again, that send email function that we created in the last video. So all of that gets deployed when you call deploy from the main branch there, or from the main directory rather. All right, so after we do that, you're going to notice if you go here, you'll see that the app was deployed. And if you try and visit the app on this page, the app isn't there. So the reason for this is when we default installed Firebase Hosting, we set public as the as the default directory. So it's looking in this public directory for the app, and the app that's in there is nothing. I mean, this is like the base Firebase file. That's essentially this one. So really, when we did Firebase build, when we ran that first command, Firebase or npm run build, that is going to create our version of our site in this dist folder. And you'll see this is basically going to have all our files right here, and they're all minified. So we need to just go ahead and update where our Firebase default directory is, and we can do that in this firebase.json file here. And you'll see the public directory is called public, and we just want to change that to dist. And then once you do that and save it, you're going to run npm run build again, and then once that's rebuilt, because it does need to rebuild that change, and then once that's rebuilt, you can redeploy with Firebase deploy. And once that is finished, then the app should load for us on our page right here. All right, so that deploy finished, so we should be able to reload this URL here, and great, we see our site as we would expect. And everything should still be working as it did in dev, so you could test that if you want. The next thing we're going to look at before we change the host name here is we're going to look at the metadata on this site. So I have there's this nice website here that you can go to, which is going to show you the preview of the metadata, right? So if you back out of this and the metatags.io preview, you'll see that this doesn't look great. So this is what, if you posted your link to this on Facebook, this is what it would look like. And it just really doesn't look good. First off, the name of our app should not have these underscores. You'll notice the underscores are also in the name up here. So we are going to want to change that, as well as we want this image to load right here. To change these meta tags is actually relatively simple. So let me show you how to do that, and then I'll also show you how to change the name and add this favicon. Going back to our code here, if you find the index.html file at the very base of it, that's where actually this is like the actual highest level of the app. So you can see this div app ID here. This is what's actually used to bind our app.view here is going to be bound to that, because this is just another template that's then being called within this index, but then everything Vue related is going through that app. So this is kind of like the highest level of the app. So definitely don't remove this. Really don't change much of this, but the title you can change. So we change that to Travel Treasury. You'll notice in Chrome that gets changed there. If you want to add the favicon here, you first are going to need to download one and place it into the static folder. So I have one here that I'll drag in, and it's just that chest there. All you need to do is also in the index file is use this link. Now the reason mine was already showing up there was because I was locally developing and it was probably cached, but it wasn't actually set up. But you will need this to actually set that up, and then that is referencing this file here. So that will update that. Then if you wanted to add Google Analytics, which I would recommend adding, it's pretty simple. You could just go create your account in Google Analytics, and it'll actually give you a code to add into your website, and it's just going to be a code. It's going to be like a little script tag that you can add right here. I would recommend that so that you could track how many users are actually viewing your site, but I'm not going to go into detail on that. I think it's pretty simple to set up, and you'll be able to figure that out yourself. But this is where you would actually link that. The last thing that we want to do is add those meta tags, which are going to give us the better content for our social links. So I already have them all here. I'm just going to paste them in and I'll go over them a little bit. There's two different ones. There's these OG tags they stand for open graphics, which most all sites actually will use this. Twitter also requires two different ones. So I'd recommend putting both of them in. The OG ones though are almost universal. So really all it is, you know, the site name, the title, description. The image here is going to be the image that will pop up, you know, in the Facebook block or whatnot. So that you're going to need to play around with. I have mine hosted on S3 because it is, you do want it to be hosted somewhere where it will be accessible. You can host it on the site here, but you'll need to give it a new path. I think it's just easier to put it on S3. So really what that means is this image URL is always going to show this image. So you just need to find somewhere to put this image. Again, I put it just in an Amazon S3 bucket, but you can probably, I think you could probably use Google Drive or really you could find just anywhere to host an image. But yeah, then the URL is just going to be the URL of the app and all of that. So if you save this, we're going to deploy again. So we're going to need to build it and then deploy it. And then once we do that, we can check back on this page here and it should give us our updated meta tags. All right, that deploy just finished. So if we go back to this meta tag with our app URL there, you'll see it looks so much better. This is definitely something you want and need to do, because now the main way you're going to get your app out there is on these social media sites. This is the main free way you're going to do it. So you definitely want an image that looks really nice and fills up the image screen. This is nice because it'll show you how it looks on all these different sites. So you can see this image works on most of them. It doesn't really look great in Slack, but I don't know. I'm really not too worried about Slack. The main ones I'm worried about are Pinterest, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So, and this is what it would look like in Google search. So that's definitely a nice thing that'll help with SEO as well. So definitely update those. The last thing you could do is add a custom domain. I already have the app deployed, so I have it deployed on another Firebase account, essentially. So everything I showed you up until now is exactly the same, roughly exactly the same. It's just a different account. All you would do here is enter your custom domain, and it's going to ask you a couple things. So it's already verified in another project, so it's not going to let me do that here, but basically it's going to give you a DNS record to put in your DNS records. So I could show you. I don't know that this is really, I think this is actually pretty easy to do. Like, I think it's pretty well documented the way Firebase will tell you what to do. I would highly recommend getting your domain from Namecheap. So Namecheap is right here. I don't know, I've worked with a bunch of different hosting providers throughout my career, and Namecheap has been honestly the easiest and the cheapest. So I do have a link down below that you can use, and it is an affiliate link, so it will give me a small commission if you do buy a domain through Namecheap. But if you don't have a domain yet, you're definitely going to want one, because you don't want your app hosted on this domain here. A, that's not going to be good for SEO. B, it's never going to be, like, no one's ever going to know to type this in. So it definitely, I mean, is relatively cheap to get one, you know, $10 a year, $12 a year at most. I mean, it depends on what you pick, but you can get them as low as like $2 a year. Anyway, though, I'll show you real quick what my DNS records look like for the traveltreasury.app. You can see I just have a few, if I go to advanced DNS records, when you're in Firebase Hosting, in this verify ownership, it's going to tell you to put this text record in here. And this is all you do. You just add a new record, choose text record, and then just enter the value that it tells you to enter there. And then it's also going to tell you to enter these values here. But that's how you do it in Namecheap. You just add, and then you can add the A record as well. But Firebase will tell you exactly what values to add. I'm guessing it's probably the same IP addresses, but the verification is definitely going to be a different value there. And once you do that, it's pretty nice because Firebase is also going to automatically give you an SSL certificate. So you'll notice this is this connection is secure, and you can look at the certificate and it is valid. But you don't even need to worry about maintaining this or anything with that, because Firebase Hosting is going to do that for you.
All right, great. So at this point, the app is hosted on Firebase and using our custom domain. Everything's looking good there. A user can enter their email and basically reserve their account for the app when it does go live. And with this landing page, we can now start promoting our app, and we can start getting users to essentially sign up for our app before the app is even live. This is arguably something you could do before you even start building your app, and the images of your app could just be made in, Adobe XD or something, and you can kind of this could kind of prove the concept before you even do any app development at all. So the landing page is definitely a very powerful thing. Another benefit of it is we do have that contact section set up, which is going to be required before we deploy our app. We're going to need something like that for the app stores. So that is definitely the main use of the landing page after the app is live. Another one, as I said, is going to be that we're going to be able to link to both our Google version and our Apple version with this one link. So then when we're promoting our app and marketing our app, we can use this one link from the landing page and put that in all of our promotional material, so that regardless of what kind of device the user is using, they'll be able to get to our app. Great, hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. All right, ciao for now.